When Elena Carter walked into that fertility clinic for a routine checkup, she thought she was protecting her future. Instead, a catastrophic medical error made her pregnant with the child of Manhattan's most dangerous crime boss, without ever meeting him, without consent, without warning. Now Luca Moretti is at her door, not to apologize, but to claim what's his. And the rival syndicates circling her apartment, they see her unborn baby as the perfect weapon. One impossible mistake, two strangers bound by blood, and a war that will decide if their accidental family survives. If you're hooked, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The envelope sat on Elena Carter's kitchen counter for 3 days before she opened it. It was cream-colored, expensive, the kind of stationery that screamed old money and private consultations. Her name was printed across the front in elegant script, hand-delivered by a courier who'd waited for her signature with unsettling patience. Elena had shoved it aside that first night, exhausted from another 14-hour day at Morrison and Blake, where she spent her life buried in spreadsheets and quarterly reports that never seemed to end. But the envelope didn't disappear. It sat there, pristine and patient, while she heated up leftovers and scrolled through her phone. It sat there while she showered and collapsed into bed. It sat there the next morning while she gulped coffee and rushed out the door. On the third night, she finally opened it. The letter inside was brief, professional, terrifying. Dear Ms. Carter, we require your immediate presence regarding a matter of utmost sensitivity concerning your recent visit to Chelsea Reproductive Health Center. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to schedule a confidential consultation. This matter is time-sensitive and of a highly personal nature. Sincerely, Margaret Whitmore, J.D., Senior Counsel, Whitmore and Associates. Elena read it twice, her hands beginning to shake. Chelsea. Reproductive health. She'd been there 6 weeks ago for her annual Well Woman exam. Everything had been normal. Routine pap smear, blood work, the usual uncomfortable small talk with Dr. Brennan about whether she was seeing anyone. The whole appointment had taken 40 minutes, and she'd walked out with a clean bill of health and a reminder to schedule next year's visit. What could possibly require a lawyer? She called the number with trembling fingers. The receptionist answered on the first ring as if she'd been waiting. Ms. Carter, thank you for calling. Ms. Whitmore has blocked tomorrow at 2 o'clock for you. The address is... Wait, I don't even know what this is about. Ms. Whitmore will explain everything in person. I can assure you this matter requires discretion and cannot be discussed over the phone. Elena's stomach twisted. Is this about a lawsuit? Did something happen at the clinic? There was a pause, heavy with unspoken weight. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, Ms. Carter. Please come alone. The line went dead. Elena stood in her tiny Manhattan apartment, the letter crumpled in her fist, and felt the first cold finger of dread trace down her spine. The law offices of Whitmore and Associates occupied the entire 42nd floor of a glass tower in Midtown. Elena had dressed carefully that morning, charcoal pencil skirt, cream blouse, her most professional heels, as if the right outfit could somehow armor her against whatever was coming. It didn't help. The receptionist led her down a hallway lined with abstract art and closed doors, finally stopping at a corner conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Inside, 3 people waited. Margaret Whitmore was exactly what Elena expected. Mid-50s, silver hair and a perfect chignon, a suit that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. But it was the other 2 who made her pause. Dr. Brennan from the clinic sat to Margaret's right, looking like she hadn't slept in days. And beside her, a man Elena didn't recognize. Late 30s, expensive suit, the kind of quietly powerful presence that filled a room without trying. Ms. Carter, please sit down. Margaret's voice was kind, but firm. The voice of someone about to deliver devastating news with practiced gentleness. Elena sat. Her purse slid off her lap and she had to fumble for it, heat rising in her cheeks. I'm going to be direct, Margaret began, folding her hands on the table. 6 weeks ago, you visited Chelsea Reproductive Health for a routine examination. During that visit, there was a catastrophic error. The words seemed to echo in the silent room. Elena's throat went dry. What kind of error? Dr. Brennan leaned forward, her face pale. Elena, I'm so sorry. There was a mix-up with the procedure rooms that day.
You were scheduled for a standard PAPE smear in room 3, but due to a clerical error and a failure in our verification protocols, she stopped, closing her eyes. You were taken to room 5 instead. I don't understand. Room 5 was prepared for an IUI procedure. Dr. Brennan's voice cracked.
Intrauterine insemination. By the time anyone realized the error, the procedure had already been performed.
The room tilted.
Elena gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white.
You're saying you artificially inseminated me? By accident?
Yes. The single word hung in the air like a death sentence. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The walls seemed to press inward, the air too thick, too hot.
But I would have known.
I would have felt something. The procedure is relatively quick and minimally invasive, Dr. Brennan said quietly. Given that you were already positioned for an examination and our staff failed to verify your identity properly, she trailed off, shame coloring her features. This is insane. Elena shoved back from the table, her chair screeching against the floor. This is completely insane. You can't just... How does this even happen? Don't you have protocols, safeguards?
We do, Margaret said calmly.
Multiple ones, all of which failed simultaneously due to human error and systemic breakdown. The clinic takes full responsibility, and we're prepared to discuss comprehensive compensation. Compensation? Elena's voice rose, sharp and brittle.
You think I want money? I want this to not have happened.
The man who hadn't spoken yet cleared his throat.
Ms. Carter, I'm afraid there's more.
Elena turned to him, her vision blurring with unshed tears.
More?
What could possibly be more? Margaret exchanged a glance with him, then continued. 3 weeks ago, you took a home pregnancy test. It was positive. The floor dropped out from under her. Elena had taken that test on a whim, driven by persistent nausea and exhaustion she'd attributed to stress. When the 2 pink lines appeared, she'd assumed it was faulty. She hadn't been with anyone in over a year. There was no possible way. Except now there was.
No, she whispered.
No, no, no. Blood work confirms you're approximately 7 weeks pregnant, Dr. Brennan said gently. The insemination was successful. Elena sank back into her chair, her legs unable to hold her. 7 weeks. She was 7 weeks pregnant with a stranger's child, implanted in her body without her knowledge, without her consent, without her even being aware it was happening. Who? The word came out strangled. Who is the father? The silence that followed was suffocating. Margaret glanced at the man beside her, and Elena saw something pass between them. A warning, perhaps, or a resignation. The biological material, Margaret said carefully, belongs to a private client who had stored specimens at the clinic for future use. Due to the nature of his profession, his identity is protected by multiple confidentiality agreements.
I don't care about your agreements, Elena's voice cracked. I'm pregnant with some stranger's baby because of your clinic's incompetence, and you won't even tell me who he is?
The man leaned forward. Miss Carter, I'm Vincent Castellano. I'm here representing the biological father's interests. He's aware of the situation, and he wants to meet with you.
Absolutely not. He has rights. Rights, Elena laughed, high and wild. He has rights? What about my rights? What about my choice? I didn't consent to any of this.
We understand your anger, Margaret said, and legally, you're under no obligation to continue the pregnancy. We can arrange— Don't. Elena held up a shaking hand. Don't you dare finish that sentence. She didn't know what she wanted, didn't know what she thought or felt beyond the screaming chaos in her head. But she knew, with sudden fierce certainty, that she wouldn't let them make this decision for her. Not after they'd already stolen so much. Vincent's expression softened. He just wants to talk. No pressure, no demands. But he deserves to know about this child, and you deserve to know who he is. Fine. Elena stood, grabbing her purse with trembling hands. Tell your client I'll meet him, somewhere public. And then I want every single document related to this nightmare, every policy you violated, every person who touched my file. Because when I'm done processing this, I'm going to burn your clinic to the ground. She walked out before anyone could respond, her heels clicking against marble floors, her whole world fracturing with every step. The coffee shop Vincent chose was expensive and quiet, tucked into a corner of the Upper East Side where privacy came standard. Elena arrived 15 minutes early, ordered a decaf latte she couldn't stomach, and tried to prepare herself for whatever was coming. She'd spent the last 3 days in a fog of disbelief and rage, researching lawyers and medical malpractice cases until her eyes burned. She'd called her best friend Sarah and sobbed into the phone for an hour. She'd stood in her bathroom at 3 in the morning, staring at her still flat stomach, trying to comprehend the reality growing inside her. And now she was about to meet him, the stranger whose genetic material had been forced into her body, who was now biologically connected to her in the most intimate way possible. When Vincent walked in, he wasn't alone. The man behind him moved like liquid shadow, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Elena's car. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, eyes so dark they looked black in the coffee shop's dim lighting. He was beautiful in a dangerous way, like a blade hidden in silk. Elena's breath caught. Vincent made quiet introductions. "Miss Carter, this is Luca Moretti." Luca didn't extend his hand. He simply looked at her, his gaze intense and assessing, taking in every detail of her face like he was memorizing it. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and measured, carrying an accent that spoke of old New York families and generations of power. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Elena lifted her chin. "I didn't have much choice." "You always have a choice." He pulled out the chair across from her and sat with fluid grace. Vincent remained standing near the door, watchful. "I wanted you to hear this from me directly, not through lawyers and intermediaries." "Hear what?" Luca folded his hands on the table. "The clinic's error is unforgivable. What happened to you is a violation of every right you possess. I want you to know I had no knowledge of this until 3 days ago, when my attorney informed me of the situation." "And what situation is that exactly?" Elena's voice was cold. "That I'm accidentally carrying your child?" "Yes." The simple acknowledgement somehow made it more real. Elena's hands tightened around her cup. "I stored genetic material at that clinic 5 years ago," Luca continued. "It was meant as insurance. I operate in a dangerous field, and I wanted to ensure the possibility of children even if something happened to me. I never authorized its use. I certainly never imagined it would be given to someone without their knowledge." "What dangerous field?" Elena demanded. "Who are you?" Luca's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dark eyes. "I run a private security and logistics firm. We handle sensitive situations for high-profile clients. It's work that sometimes attracts unwanted attention." It was a lie, or at least not the whole truth. Elena could feel it in the careful way he chose his words, the way Vincent's hand drifted toward his jacket whenever anyone walked past their table. "You're lying." "I'm simplifying." "Then unsimplify it." Elena leaned forward. "I deserve to know who the father of this baby actually is." Luca studied her for a long moment, something like respect crossing his features. "You're right. You do." He paused, then spoke with quiet precision. "My family has been involved in organized business ventures in this city for 4 generations. We operate outside traditional legal structures. Some people call it crime. I call it survival." The words settled like stones in Elena's stomach. "You're a criminal." "I'm a businessman who operates in gray areas. I protect my people, I honor my agreements, and I don't tolerate disloyalty. That's all you need to know for now." "For now?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "This isn't a negotiation. I don't want anything from you." "What do you want?" Luca asked, his gaze unwavering. "From this situation?" Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth was, she didn't know. The pregnancy was still too new, too impossible to process. She hadn't even decided if she was going to continue it, though the thought of terminating it made her chest ache in ways she didn't want to examine. "I want my life back," she finally said. "I want this to not have happened." "I can't give you that." Luca's voice gentled just slightly. "But I can offer protection, resources, and support. Whatever you decide about the pregnancy, I'll respect it. But if you choose to continue,
He paused. I want to be involved. Why? Because it's my child. Simple, absolute. And I take care of what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone sent a shiver down Elena's spine, part warning, part something else she refused to name. I need time, she said. I can't think about this right now. I can't. Take all the time you need. Luca reached into his jacket and withdrew a card, sliding it across the table. My private number. Call me when you're ready to talk.
or if you need anything before then. Elena stared at the card, heavy cream stock with embossed lettering, just a name and a number, nothing else. What if I decide I don't want you involved? She asked quietly. Luca's expression hardened, just for a moment, and Elena glimpsed the dangerous man beneath the civilized veneer. Then we'll discuss that when the time comes. But understand something, Elena. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I don't walk away from my responsibilities, ever. The way he said her name, intimate, possessive, made her skin prickle. She grabbed the card and stood abruptly. I have to go. Vincent will take you home. I don't need... It's not a request. Luca's tone was calm but immovable. You're carrying my child. That makes you a target for anyone who wants to hurt me. You'll have protection whether you want it or not. Elena's blood ran cold. Excuse me? I have enemies, Elena. People who would use any weakness against me. Right now, you and that baby represent a significant vulnerability. He stood, towering over her. I won't apologize for keeping you safe. You can't just decide, I already have. He buttoned his jacket with controlled precision. Vincent will coordinate with you on security measures. Please don't fight him on this. It's not worth the risk. Before Elena could respond, Luca walked away, leaving her standing in the middle of the coffee shop with a stranger's business card and the crushing weight of a future she'd never chosen. Elena didn't call. For 2 weeks, she threw herself into work, staying late at the office and avoiding her apartment where Vincent's security team had installed cameras and motion sensors despite her protests. She ignored Luca's card, left Vincent's calls unanswered, and tried desperately to pretend her life was still normal. It wasn't. The nausea got worse. Exhaustion dragged at her bones, and every morning she stood in front of the mirror and stared at her stomach, trying to comprehend the impossible reality growing inside her. She made an appointment with her own doctor, a kind woman in her 50s who'd been seeing Elena for years. The ultrasound was scheduled for Thursday. Wednesday night, everything changed. Elena was walking home from the subway, her mind foggy with fatigue when she noticed the car. Black sedan, tinted windows, moving too slowly down the street beside her. She quickened her pace, heart beginning to hammer. The car matched her speed. Elena's hand dove into her purse, fumbling for her phone. She had Vincent's number programmed in, though she'd sworn she'd never use it. Her fingers found the phone just as the sedan's doors opened. 2 men got out. Big, efficient, moving with military precision. Elena ran. She made it maybe 20 feet before a hand clamped around her arm, yanking her backward. She screamed, but the sound was cut off by a palm over her mouth, chemical sweet and nauseating. Chloroform, some distant part of her brain registered. They're using chloroform. The world tilted, darkness eating at the edges of her vision. She fought, kicking and clawing, but her limbs felt heavy, disconnected. She was being dragged toward the car, her heels scraping against pavement, her purse falling forgotten to the ground. Then gunfire cracked through the air. The hand over her mouth jerked away. Someone shouted. Elena collapsed to her knees, gasping, her vision swimming. Through the haze, she saw Vincent emerging from a black SUV that had appeared from nowhere, weapon drawn and firing with controlled precision. The 2 men scrambled back to their sedan, tires squealing as they fled. Vincent was at Elena's side in seconds, his hands gentle as he lifted her. Are you hurt? Did they inject you with anything? Elena shook her head, still gasping for air. Chloroform, just chloroform. Christ! Vincent's jaw tightened. He swept her into his arms like she weighed nothing and carried her to the SUV. Hospital, now. No, I'm fine. You're 7 weeks pregnant and you just inhaled chloroform. His voice was steel. We're going to the hospital, non-negotiable.
Elena was too weak to argue. She let him bundle her into the vehicle, her whole body shaking with adrenaline crash. As they pulled away, she saw her purse still lying on the sidewalk, contents spilled across concrete. Her normal life, scattered and abandoned. The hospital was a blur of bright lights and worried faces. Vincent had called ahead, and they were ushered into a private room where a young doctor examined Elena with efficient gentleness. Blood work, another ultrasound, questions about symptoms and exposure. Through it all, Vincent stayed close, his presence both comforting and terrifying. "The baby's fine," the doctor finally announced, and Elena felt something in her chest unclench. Heart rate is strong, no signs of distress. The chloroform exposure was minimal, not enough to cause harm. But you should rest for the next few days. No stress, no exertion. "Thank you," Elena whispered. After the doctor left, Vincent pulled up a chair beside her bed. "I called Luca. He's on his way." Elena closed her eyes. "Of course he is." "Elena," Vincent's voice was uncharacteristically gentle. "Those men weren't random. They knew where you'd be, knew your routine. Someone's been watching you." "Who?" "We'll find out." His expression hardened. "But this is exactly what Luca warned you about. You're a target now, and tonight proved you can't protect yourself." "I didn't ask for any of this." Tears burned behind Elena's eyelids. "I didn't ask to be pregnant, didn't ask to be dragged into some crime war, didn't ask for any of it." "I know." Vincent's hand settled on her shoulder, surprisingly warm. "But this is the reality now. You can accept protection, or you can put yourself and that baby at risk. Choose." Before Elena could respond, the door opened. Luca filled the doorway, his expression thunderous. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his eyes scanning Elena from head to toe, cataloging every detail. "Are you hurt?" "No." "The baby?" "Fine." Something in Luca's rigid posture relaxed just slightly. He pulled the other chair close to her bedside and sat, his presence overwhelming in the small room. "Tell me what happened. Everything." Elena recounted the attack in halting sentences, her voice shaking. Luca listened in silence, his jaw tightening with each word. When she finished, he turned to Vincent. "Retaliation?" "Has to be. Probably Dante's crew testing our defenses." "Find them." Luca's voice was ice. "Every single one. I want names, addresses, and surveillance footage by morning." Vincent nodded and left without another word. Silence settled over the room. Elena stared at her hands, unable to meet Luca's gaze. "This is insane. My life was normal 2 weeks ago. I was just an accountant with a boring job and a small apartment. Now I'm being kidnapped by criminals and protected by me," Luca finished quietly. "I know this isn't what you wanted, but it's what we have." "I can't live like this," Elena's voice broke. "I can't spend every day looking over my shoulder, wondering if someone's going to grab me off the street." "You won't have to." Luca leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "Come stay at my estate. Full security, private grounds, trained guards. You'll be safe there." "That's basically imprisonment. It's protection. From a life I never chose." Elena's frustration boiled over. "You keep talking about responsibility and keeping me safe, but what about what I want? What about my choices?" "What do you want?" Luca asked, echoing his question from their first meeting. "Tell me, and I'll make it happen." Elena opened her mouth, then stopped. Because the truth was complicated and terrifying. She wanted her old life back, but she also wanted this baby safe. She wanted nothing to do with Luca Moretti and his dangerous world, but she also felt inexplicably drawn to the fierce protectiveness in his eyes. She wanted to hate him for turning her life upside down, but he hadn't done this. The clinic had. "I don't know," she finally whispered. Luca's expression softened. "Then let me make this decision for you, just for now. Come to the estate. Give yourself time to heal, to think, to figure out what you want. If you decide you want to leave, I won't stop you. You promise?" "On my life." The sincerity in his voice broke through Elena's defenses. She was exhausted, scared, and still shaking from the attack. The thought of going back to her apartment, of being alone and vulnerable, made her stomach twist with fear. "Okay," she said quietly, "but just until I figure things out." Luca's hand covered hers, warm and solid. "That's all I'm asking."
The estate was not what Elena expected. She'd imagined something gothic and oppressive, dark hallways and heavy furniture, like a villain's lair in a movie. Instead, Luca's home was surprisingly beautiful. A sprawling mansion set on 10 private acres in Westchester, with tall windows that let in streams of natural light and modern architecture that somehow felt warm rather than cold. Vincent drove her there the next morning after the hospital released her with strict instructions to rest. Elena dozed in the back seat, exhaustion pulling her under despite her anxiety. When they arrived, Luca was waiting on the front steps. He helped her out of the car personally, his hand gentle at her elbow. "I had the east wing prepared for you. Private bedroom, bathroom, sitting room. If you need anything changed, just tell Maria. She manages the household staff." Elena looked up at the massive house, then back at Luca. "How many people live here?" "Just me. And now you." He paused. "And security, but they're mostly external." "This is too much." "It's necessary." Luca guided her inside through a soaring foyer with marble floors and a staircase that curved upward like something from a dream. "I need you safe, Elena. Not just for the baby. For you." The unexpected tenderness in his voice made her throat tighten. He led her through hallways lined with art, some modern, some classical, all expensive, to a suite of rooms that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens. The bed was enormous, covered in soft linens. Fresh flowers sat on the dresser. "It's beautiful," Elena admitted. "It's yours." Luca moved to the door, then paused. "Rest. We'll talk more when you're ready." He was almost gone when Elena called out, "Luca?" He turned, one hand on the doorframe. "Thank you," she said quietly, for everything. I know I've been difficult." "You've been scared." His dark eyes held hers. "That's different." After he left, Elena sank onto the bed and finally let herself cry. For the life she'd lost. For the impossible situation she was in. For the strange, fierce man who'd somehow become her only anchor in the chaos. Outside in the garden, Luca stood with Vincent and reviewed security reports. The men who'd tried to take Elena had been found. They wouldn't make that mistake again, but the message was clear. This was war. And Elena Carter, whether she knew it or not, had just become the most valuable piece on the board. Luca looked up at the window of her room, watching her shadow move behind curtains. He told her the truth about one thing. He took care of what was his. And Elena, stubborn, brave, beautiful Elena, was his now, whether she'd chosen it or not. He'd burn the whole city down before he let anyone touch her again. The first week passed in a strange, suspended reality. Elena woke each morning in a bed that wasn't hers, in a house that felt like a museum, carrying a child she'd never planned. She spent her days wandering the estate's sprawling grounds, trying to reconcile the woman she'd been with the woman she was becoming. The gardens were beautiful, roses climbing white trellises, stone paths winding through carefully manicured lawns, a fountain at the center where water danced in endless circles. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt like a gilded cage. Luca kept his distance, appearing only at dinner, a formal affair served in a dining room large enough to echo. They ate at opposite ends of a table that could seat 20, making stilted conversation about nothing important. The weather, the food, carefully avoiding the elephant in the room, or rather the child growing in Elena's womb. On the 8th day, Elena's patience snapped. She found Luca in his study, a room lined with dark wood and leather-bound books that probably cost more than her yearly salary. He was on the phone, speaking rapid Italian to someone who was clearly testing his patience. When he saw her in the doorway, he ended the call abruptly. "Elena, is something wrong? We need to talk." She stepped inside without waiting for invitation, closing the door behind her. "Really talk, not whatever polite dance we've been doing at dinner." Luca set down his phone, his expression unreadable. "All right, what do you want to discuss?" "Everything." Elena crossed her arms, trying to ignore how the late afternoon light caught in his dark hair, making him look less like a crime boss and more like some Renaissance painting come to life. "I've been here over a week and I know almost nothing about you. About what you do, about why people want to hurt me, about what happens next. What happens next is up to you. Stop deflecting." Elena moved closer to his desk, her frustration mounting. You said you wanted to be involved with this baby. Fine. But I can't make any decisions when I'm living in the dark. So talk to me. Tell me the truth about who you are and what I'm really dealing with. Luca studied her for a long moment, something like approval flickering in his dark eyes. Then he stood, moving to the bar cart in the corner. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, then held up a bottle of sparkling water in question. Elena nodded. He poured her a glass and brought it to her, their fingers brushing as she took it. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system. Awareness, sharp and unwelcome. My family came to New York 4 generations ago, Luca began, leaning against his desk. They built an empire through shipping, warehouses, labor unions, legitimate on the surface, but with roots that ran deep into the underground. By the time I was born, the Moretti name meant power in this city. It also meant danger. Your parents? Dead. His voice was flat. Car accident when I was 17. Convenient timing, given that my father had just refused an alliance with the Calabrese family. The investigation found no evidence of foul play, but we knew better. Elena's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Luca shrugged, the gesture at odds with the tension in his shoulders. It taught me a valuable lesson. In this world, showing weakness gets you killed. So I took over the family business early, rebuilt our defenses, and made it clear that the Morettis weren't a target anymore. By being more dangerous than everyone else? By being smarter. He took a sip of whiskey. I expanded into legitimate ventures, real estate, private security firms, consulting, enough clean money to satisfy the authorities, enough respect to keep rival families from testing our borders. I don't deal drugs, don't traffic people, don't prey on the vulnerable. I run a tight operation with clear rules. But you still break the law. Every day. His honesty was startling. I oversee gambling networks, manage protection services for businesses in our territory, facilitate transactions that exist in legal gray areas. I bend regulations. I avoid taxes, and yes, sometimes I use force to protect what's mine. Does that make me a criminal in your eyes? Elena wanted to say yes, wanted to maintain the moral high ground, to cling to the clear distinctions between right and wrong that had guided her whole life. But standing in this beautiful room, looking at this complicated man who'd shown her nothing but protection and unexpected gentleness, the answer wasn't simple anymore. I don't know what it makes you, she admitted quietly. It makes me a realist. Luca set down his glass. The world isn't black and white, Elena. It's 1,000 shades of gray, and survival means learning to navigate them. I protect my people, I honor my word, and I don't apologize for the choices I've made to stay alive. And the people who tried to take me? His expression darkened. The Rossi family. They've been pushing at our territory for months, testing boundaries. When word got out about your pregnancy, and it did get out, we have a leak I'm still hunting, they saw an opportunity to hurt me. By hurting me. Yes. No apology in his voice, just hard truth. You're my weakness now. The baby is leverage. Anyone who wants to control me will come after you first. The bluntness of it stole Elena's breath. So what do I do? Hide here forever. You stay safe until I eliminate the threat. Luca moved closer, his presence overwhelming in a way that had nothing to do with intimidation. I have people tracking every member of the Rossi operation. Within the month, they'll either back off or they'll be gone. Either way, you'll be protected. You're talking about killing people. I'm talking about survival. His voice was steel wrapped in silk. They tried to take you off the street in broad daylight, Elena. They drugged you while you were carrying a child. You think they deserve mercy? I think violence just breeds more violence. Maybe. Luca's hand came up, hovering near her face before dropping back to his side, as if he'd thought better of the touch. But sometimes it's the only language certain people understand. And I'm fluent. Elena should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the casual way he discussed eliminating human beings. Instead, she felt something else entirely. A dark fascination, maybe, or the terrible recognition that in his world, his rules made a brutal kind of sense. I need air, she said abruptly, setting down her untouched water. Luca didn't try to stop her as she fled the study, but she felt his gaze follow her all the way to the door. Outside, the evening had turned cool and crisp. Elena walked through the gardens until her breathing steadied, trying to process everything he'd told her. She'd wanted honesty, and he'd given it to her without sugarcoating. Now she had to decide what to do with it. She found herself at the fountain, watching water cascade over stone. Her hand drifted to her stomach, still flat, but not for much longer. In 3 months, maybe 4, she'd start to show. In 7 months, she'd give birth to a child who was half Luca Moretti, half her. A child caught between 2 completely different worlds. You shouldn't be out here alone. Elena turned to find Vincent approaching. His perpetual vigilance softened slightly by the fading light. I'm on the estate. I thought that was safe. Safer. Not safe. He stopped beside the fountain, scanning the perimeter with practiced efficiency. Luca told you about the Rossis? He told me enough. Vincent was quiet for a moment, then said, He's not usually like this, you know. Protective to the point of obsession. It's the baby, but it's also you. Elena's pulse quickened. What do you mean? I've known Luca for 15 years, watched him build this empire, watched him shut down every emotion that might make him vulnerable. He doesn't let people in, doesn't allow weaknesses. Vincent's expression was thoughtful. But with you, it's different. He cares, and that scares the hell out of him. He barely knows me. Doesn't seem to matter. Vincent shrugged. Just thought you should know. The choices he's making right now, the war he's about to start with the Rossis, it's not just about the baby. It's about keeping you safe, both of you. Before Elena could respond, Vincent's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. We need to get you inside, now. What's wrong? Possible breach on the east perimeter. He was already moving, one hand on her elbow, guiding her quickly toward the house. Probably nothing, but we don't take chances. They'd barely made it halfway across the lawn when the first gunshot cracked through the air. Vincent threw Elena to the ground, his body covering hers, as more shots followed. Rapid, professional, coming from multiple directions. Elena's scream was muffled against grass and dirt, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Stay down! Vincent shouted, returning fire at shadows in the tree line. The estate erupted into chaos. Security lights blazed to life, flooding the grounds. More gunfire, closer now, shouting in Italian and English. The sharp smell of gunpowder mixing with the sweet scent of roses. Then Luca was there, appearing out of nowhere like some avenging angel. He hauled Elena up with one arm, shielding her with his body as he fired his weapon with the other hand. Get her to the safe room, now! Vincent grabbed Elena and ran, half dragging her across the lawn while Luca provided cover. They crashed through the back entrance, down a hallway Elena had never seen, to a reinforced door that Vincent opened with a thumbprint scanner. Inside, he ordered. The safe room was small and windowless, lined with monitors showing every angle of the estate. Elena collapsed onto a bench, her whole body shaking. On the screens, she could see dark figures moving through the gardens, see Luca's security team engaging them with brutal efficiency. And there, on the central monitor, Luca himself, moving through the chaos with deadly grace, taking down attackers with precise headshots that made Elena's stomach turn. This was his world, violence and blood and survival measured in split-second decisions. How many? She whispered. Vincent was on the phone, coordinating with his team. At least 8 hostiles, professional gear, military training. This isn't the Rossis. They don't have this kind of firepower. Then who? I don't know, but we're about to find out. The firefight lasted 17 minutes. Elena counted every second, watching the monitors with her hands pressed to her mouth, unable to look away as Luca's team systematically eliminated the threat. When the last attacker fell, eerie silence settled over the estate. Vincent waited another 5 minutes before opening the safe room door. Stay close to me. They emerged into a house that looked like a war zone. Bullet holes in walls, shattered glass, blood on marble floors. Elena's knees nearly buckled, but Vincent's steady hand kept her upright. Luca was in the foyer, breathing hard, a cut above his eye bleeding freely. When he saw Elena, relief flashed across his face before his usual control reasserted itself. Are you hurt? He crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands moving over her arms, her shoulders, checking for injuries with surprising gentleness. I'm fine. The baby's fine. Elena couldn't stop staring at the blood on his shirt. His or someone else's. She couldn't tell. What happened? Coordinated assault. They came in 4 teams, hit us from all sides. Luca's jaw was tight. This wasn't about taking you. This was about sending a message. What message? That I'm vulnerable. He looked past her to where his security team was dragging bodies outside. Someone wants me to know they can reach inside my own home. Vincent approached, holding a tablet. Boss, you need to see this. The screen showed a photo, one of the dead attackers, his jacket open to reveal a tattoo on his chest. A serpent coiled around a dagger, rendered in stark black ink. Luca's expression went cold as death. Calabrese. I thought you said it wasn't the Rosses, Elena said. It's not. Luca's voice was deadly quiet. It's worse. The Calabrese family is old power. They've controlled the southern territories for decades. If they're moving against us, this isn't just a territorial dispute. This is the beginning of a war. Vincent set down the tablet. They must have formed an alliance with the Rossis, combined forces to take you out. Then they just made a fatal mistake. Luca turned to Elena, his dark eyes blazing with barely contained rage. I need you to go upstairs, lock yourself in your room. Don't come out until I come for you personally. What are you going to do? What I should have done the moment they put you at risk. He cupped her face with blood-stained hands, the touch at odds with the violence still crackling around them. I'm going to end this, all of it. They want a war? I'll give them one they'll regret starting. Elena's breath caught at the intensity in his gaze, fierce, protective, and something darker she didn't want to name. Luca, go, please. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, feather light. I can't do what needs to be done if I'm worried about you. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him violence wasn't the answer, that there had to be another way. But looking at the destruction around them, at the bodies being hauled away, at the blood on his hands and the determination in his eyes, she knew the time for moral debates had passed. This was survival now. Raw and brutal and utterly uncompromising. Elena nodded and let Vincent escort her upstairs. Behind them, Luca was already on his phone, issuing orders in rapid Italian, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. The war had begun. In her room, Elena locked the door and sank onto the bed, her whole body trembling with delayed shock. She could hear activity downstairs, people moving, orders being shouted, the sound of vehicles arriving and departing. The estate had transformed from a sanctuary into a fortress, and she was trapped at the center of it. Hours passed. Elena dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound. Around 3 a.m, a soft knock came at her door. Elena, it's me. She recognized Luca's voice immediately. When she opened the door, he stood in the hallway looking exhausted and dangerous, the cut above his eye now cleaned and bandaged, his shirt changed but still carrying the scent of gunpowder. Can I come in? Elena stepped back, letting him enter. He moved to the window, staring out at the grounds where security lights still blazed. Is it over? She asked quietly. For tonight. Luca's shoulders were rigid with tension. We killed 7 of theirs, captured 1. He's being questioned now. Elena didn't ask what that meant, didn't want to know. I'm moving you tomorrow, Luca continued. Somewhere even more secure. A property upstate, completely off the grid. You'll have private medical care, anything you need, but you won't be accessible to anyone outside my immediate circle. For how long? Until the threat is eliminated. He turned to face her. I won't lie to you, Elena. This is going to get worse before it gets better. The Calabrese family doesn't back down easily, and now that blood has been spilled, they'll want revenge. You and the baby are their best targets. So I just hide? For months, maybe? You stay alive. Luca crossed to her, his presence overwhelming in the quiet room. I know this isn't the life you wanted. I know I'm asking you to give up everything, your job, your apartment, your freedom. But I'm asking you to trust me to keep you safe. And then what? Elena's voice cracked. When the war's over and the baby comes, what happens to us? That's your choice. His hand came up, fingertips barely grazing her cheek. But know this. I will protect you and our child with everything I have. Whether you choose to be part of my life afterward or walk away, that won't change. You're under my protection now,
always. The intensity in his eyes stole her breath. Elena should have stepped back, should have put distance between them. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, seeking the warmth and certainty he offered. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know." Luca's other hand settled at her waist, gentle but possessive. "But you're stronger than you think. You've already survived things that would have broken most people. You'll survive this too. Will you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Something flickered in Luca's expression, surprise maybe, or vulnerability he quickly masked. "I don't plan on dying anytime soon. I have too much to live for now." His gaze dropped to her stomach, then back to her face, and Elena felt the shift between them, awareness crackling like electricity in the small space that separated them. She could feel his breath on her skin, could see the pulse beating in his throat, could smell his cologne mixed with smoke and danger. This was insane. She barely knew him. He was a criminal, a killer, everything she should run from. But standing here in the darkness, with his hands on her body and his eyes promising protection she desperately needed, all her objections felt hollow. "Luca," she breathed, not sure if it was a warning or an invitation. He seemed to understand anyway. His thumb traced along her jaw, tilting her face up to his. "Tell me to leave." She should. Every rational thought screamed at her to push him away, to maintain the boundaries that were already far too blurred. But rationality had abandoned her somewhere between the medical error and the gun battle on the lawn. "I can't," she admitted. The confession hung between them for one heartbeat, too. Then Luca closed the distance, his mouth finding hers with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. The kiss was soft at first, almost tentative, as if he was giving her time to change her mind. But when Elena's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, something broke in both of them. The kiss deepened, turned hungry and desperate, months of tension and fear and unwanted attraction finally finding release. Luca's hand slid into her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss further. Elena pressed against him, feeling the solid strength of his body, the steady beat of his heart. For the first time since her world had shattered, she felt grounded, safe, wanted. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca rested his forehead against hers. "This changes nothing about your choice. When this is over, you can still walk away. And if I don't want to?" His arms tightened around her. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret staying." It was a promise and a threat and a hope all wrapped together. Elena should have been terrified by the possessiveness in his voice, by how quickly she was falling for a man who represented everything dangerous in the world. Instead, she felt something click into place, a rightness she couldn't explain or justify. "Stay with me tonight," she whispered. "Just stay." Luca's expression softened in a way she'd never seen before. "Always." They moved to the bed, but there was nothing sexual in it, just the desperate need for comfort and connection. Luca held her against his chest, one hand protectively covering her stomach, and Elena let herself pretend for a moment that this was normal, that they were normal, that the child growing inside her was planned and wanted by two people who'd chosen each other. Outside, security teams patrolled the grounds, and war councils strategized revenge. But in this room, in this moment, there was only warmth and safety and the fragile beginning of something that might have been love if either of them were brave enough to name it. Elena fell asleep to the steady rhythm of Luca's heartbeat, unaware that across the city, in a penthouse office overlooking the harbor, Antonio Calabrese was planning his next move. The girl was the key. Take her, and Moretti would crumble. It was just a matter of time. Dawn came too quickly. Pale light filtering through curtains Elena didn't remember closing. She woke to find Luca already gone, only the indent in the pillow beside her, and the lingering warmth of his presence proving he'd been there at all. For a moment, she let herself imagine a different life, one where waking up beside him was normal, where the child inside her was conceived in love instead of medical error, where danger didn't lurk outside every window. Then reality crashed back in, and she remembered what today meant. The move to the upstate property happened with military precision. Vincent arrived at her door before she'd finished dressing, his expression grim. "We leave in 20 minutes. Pack only essentials. Everything else will be replaced." "Where's Luca?" "Handling business." Vincent's tone made it clear what kind of business that was.
He'll join you tonight. Elena wanted to protest, to demand to see him before they left, but the tension in Vincent's shoulders told her time was a luxury they couldn't afford. She threw clothes into a bag with shaking hands, grabbed her phone and laptop, and tried not to think about how her entire life now fit into a single suitcase. The convoy of 3 black SUVs rolled out exactly 20 minutes later. Elena sat in the middle vehicle, sandwiched between 2 armed guards, who said nothing for the entire 2-hour drive north. Through tinted windows, she watched the city give way to suburbs, then countryside, then dense forest that seemed to swallow the road whole. The property emerged from the trees like something out of a fairy tale. A stone manor house perched on a hillside, surrounded by acres of woods and protected by gates that looked like they could withstand a military assault. It was beautiful and isolating in equal measure. "Welcome to your new home," Vincent said as they pulled up to the entrance. "At least for a while." Inside, the house was surprisingly warm. Someone had filled vases with fresh flowers, stocked the kitchen with food, laid fires in multiple fireplaces despite the mild weather. Elena's suite occupied the entire second floor, bedroom, bathroom, sitting room, and a nursery that made her throat tighten when she saw it. Painted soft yellow, furnished with a crib and changing table and rocking chair, waiting for a baby who existed only as a promise and a prayer. "The medical team will be here this afternoon for your checkup," Vincent explained, setting her bag down. "You have full run of the house and grounds, but don't go beyond the tree line. We have sensors and patrols, but it's safer if you stay visible." "Am I a prisoner here?" Vincent's expression softened. "You're protected here. There's a difference." After he left, Elena wandered through the empty house, her footsteps echoing on hardwood floors. It was furnished but unlived in, like a hotel designed to look like a home. She found herself in the nursery again, running her fingers over the crib's smooth wood, trying to imagine a baby sleeping there. Her baby. Luca's baby. Their accidental daughter who'd become the catalyst for a war. The medical team arrived at 3. A doctor, a nurse, and enough equipment to stock a small clinic. They examined Elena with efficient kindness, took blood samples, performed an ultrasound that made her cry when she saw the tiny heartbeat flickering on the screen. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Martinez said, a woman in her 50s with gentle hands and kind eyes. "The baby's measuring right on track. Heart rate is strong. How are you feeling?" "Scared," Elena admitted. "That's normal." "Doctor," Martinez squeezed her hand, "but physically, you and the baby are doing beautifully. Try to rest, reduce stress as much as possible, and call me immediately if anything feels wrong." After they left, Elena tried to follow that advice. She attempted to read, to watch television, to do anything that might quiet the anxiety churning in her stomach. Nothing worked. By the time darkness fell, she was pacing the sitting room like a caged animal, jumping at every sound. When headlights finally swept across the windows around 9 o'clock, Elena's heart leaped. She was downstairs before the car doors even opened, desperate for Luca's presence in a way that terrified and comforted her simultaneously. He looked exhausted when he walked in, shadows under his eyes, tension in every line of his body, dried blood on his knuckles that he'd made no attempt to hide. But when he saw Elena waiting in the foyer, some of that tension bled away. "You're here," she breathed. "I said I would be." He closed the distance between them, pulling her into his arms with a desperation that matched her own. "How was the trip?" "Long, quiet." Elena pressed her face against his chest, breathing in his scent beneath the smell of smoke and violence. "How was your day?" "Productive." His hand stroked through her hair, the touch gentle despite the violence she knew those hands had committed. "The Calabrese family is weakened. Not finished, but bleeding." Elena didn't ask for details. Didn't want to know how many people had died to make that statement true. They ate dinner in the kitchen, simple pasta that Luca prepared himself while Elena watched in surprise. "You cook?" "My grandmother insisted I learn." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "She said a man who can't feed himself is dependent, and dependence is weakness." "She sounds formidable." She was. Luca set a plate in front of Elena, then took the seat beside her rather than across. Close enough to touch, like he needed the proximity as much as she did. "She died when I was 15. Sometimes I think she's the only person who ever saw me as something other than a weapon or a successor."
The vulnerability in his admission made Elena's chest ache. What did she see? A boy who liked to read poetry and draw. He said it like a confession. Who wanted to study architecture instead of taking over the family business. Who cried the first time my father made me watch an execution. Elena set down her fork, her appetite forgotten. You were just a child. I was a Moretti. Children don't get to stay innocent in this world. Luca's jaw tightened. My father believed exposure built character, that witnessing violence would make me stronger, harder, capable of doing what needed to be done. Did it? It made me hollow. His dark eyes met hers, stripped of their usual armor. Until recently, I couldn't remember the last time I felt anything beyond anger or determination. Everything else was just empty. And now? Luca's hand covered hers, warm and solid. Now I feel too much. Fear for you and the baby. Rage at anyone who threatens you. And something else I don't have words for yet. Elena understood because she felt it too. This dangerous, impossible thing growing between them alongside the child in her womb. It defied logic and self-preservation, but it was real nonetheless. I'm falling for you, she whispered. I know I shouldn't. I know it's crazy and too fast and probably a disaster waiting to happen, but I can't help it. Luca's breath caught. For a long moment, he just stared at her, something raw and wounded in his expression. Came from something terrible. Even if it's came from something terrible, even if it's complicated and dangerous, you're good, Elena, and I don't deserve you, but I'm selfish enough to want you anyway. When he kissed her this time, it was different from the desperate passion of the night before. This was tender, almost worshipful, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. Elena melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer despite the voice in her head screaming warnings about falling for dangerous men. They made it as far as the sitting room before clothes started coming off. Luca lifted Elena onto the couch, his mouth trailing down her neck while her fingers worked at his buttons. She should have been self-conscious about her changing body, about the small swell of her stomach that was just beginning to show. Instead, when Luca's hand settled protectively over that slight curve, she felt cherished. Is this okay? He murmured against her skin. The baby. Dr. Martinez said it's safe. Elena arched into his touch, desire burning through her veins. Luca, please. He silenced her with another kiss, deep and claiming, before pulling back just enough to meet her eyes. Tell me if anything hurts. Tell me if you want to stop. I won't want to stop. The promise in those words unleashed something in both of them. They came together with desperate need, seeking connection and comfort and proof that they were still alive amid all the death surrounding them. Luca was careful despite his passion, attentive to her every response, making sure she felt pleasure before seeking his own. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the couch, Elena's head on Luca's chest while his fingers traced idle patterns on her bare shoulder. Outside, security lights swept across the grounds in steady intervals, a reminder that their moment of peace existed in a bubble of violence. My mother was an artist, Elena said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. She painted these huge abstract canvases that nobody understood but everyone loved. She died when I was 12. Cancer, fast and brutal. My father fell apart after that. Started drinking, stopped working, just disappeared into his grief. Luca's arms tightened around her. I'm sorry. I learned to take care of myself, went to college on scholarships, worked 3 jobs to pay rent, built this safe, controlled life where nothing unexpected could hurt me. She laughed bitterly. And then a medical error destroyed all of it in one afternoon. Do you regret it? Luca asked quietly. The baby, I mean. Not the error, but the result. Elena considered the question seriously, her hand drifting to her stomach. A month ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Now, she paused, searching for honesty. Now I think this baby might be the best accident that ever happened to me. Even with everything else, the danger, the fear, the complete upheaval of my life, I can't regret her. Her? Luca's voice was soft with wonder. I don't know yet, but I have a feeling. Elena tilted her head to look up at him. What do you want, boy or girl? Healthy. His hand covered hers on her stomach. That's all that matters, healthy and safe and loved.
The simplicity of the answer made Elena's eyes burn. This man who commanded an empire built on violence and fear, who'd killed to protect her without hesitation, wanted nothing more than a healthy child. The contradiction of him was staggering. They eventually made it upstairs to the bedroom, where they made love again with less urgency and more tenderness. Luca fell asleep first, his arm draped possessively across Elena's waist, his breathing deep and even. Elena lay awake longer, watching shadows dance across the ceiling, thinking about the impossible future they were building together. She must have drifted off eventually because she woke to chaos, shouting downstairs, running footsteps, the sharp crack of gunfire that jerked her violently into consciousness. Beside her, Luca was already moving, pulling on pants and grabbing the weapon he kept in the nightstand. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice cold and lethal. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me or Vincent." "What's happening?" "They found us." Luca was at the door, weapon raised. "Don't come out, Elena, no matter what you hear." Then he was gone, and Elena was alone in the darkness with fear clawing at her throat. She locked the door with shaking hands, then backed toward the bathroom, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. Her phone was on the nightstand. She grabbed it, her fingers hovering over the emergency call button. More gunfire, closer now. Breaking glass. A scream cut short. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, so hard she thought she might be sick. Then silence. Thick and terrible and wrong. Elena stood frozen in the middle of the bedroom, straining to hear anything over the blood rushing in her ears. Footsteps on the stairs, slow and deliberate. One set, then another. Voices speaking in Italian too low to make out words. A knock on the door made her jump violently. "Elena?" Luca's voice, strained but alive. "It's me. Open the door." She fumbled with the lock, throwing it open to find Luca standing in the hallway, blood splattered across his bare chest and face. For a horrible moment, Elena thought he was injured. Then she realized the blood wasn't his. "Are you hurt?" she demanded, her hands already running over him, checking for wounds. "I'm fine. It's over." Luca pulled her against him, heedless of the blood. 3 of them made it past the perimeter. They're dead now. Elena should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the casual way he discussed killing. Instead, she just held him tighter, grateful he was alive and whole and here. Vincent appeared at the top of the stairs, his expression grim. "We need to move her again." They knew exactly where to hit, which means the leak is worse than we thought. "No." Luca's arms tightened around Elena. "No more running. It's time to end this." "Boss, we can't protect her if they keep finding us. So we make sure they can't find her." Luca's voice was steel. "Set up the meet with Calabrese tomorrow night. Neutral ground, full security. I'm done playing defense." Vincent's eyes widened. "That's suicide. That's strategy." Luca finally released Elena, turning to face his second-in-command. "He wants me dead? Fine. Let him try. But this ends tomorrow, one way or another." "What about Elena?" "She stays here with maximum security. You personally will guard her. If I'm not back by dawn..." Luca's jaw clenched. "You get her somewhere safe and you keep her safe. That's an order." "Luca, no." Elena grabbed his arm, fear icing through her veins. "You can't just walk into a trap." "I'm not walking into anything. I'm controlling the terms of engagement." He turned back to her, his expression softening. "This is what I do, Elena. How I've survived this long. Trust me." "I do trust you, but that doesn't mean I'm not terrified of losing you." Something shifted in Luca's eyes, surprise maybe, or wonder that someone cared enough to fear for him. He pulled her close again, his hand cradling the back of her head. "You won't lose me," he murmured against her hair. "I have too much to live for now." But Elena heard the uncertainty beneath the promise, the acknowledgement that in his world, survival was never guaranteed. The rest of the night passed in tense preparation. Luca showered and dressed while Vincent coordinated with their contacts, setting up the meeting that could end the war or end Luca's life. Elena sat in the bedroom, her hand on her stomach, trying to find words to make him stay. She couldn't find any that wouldn't make her a hypocrite. She'd seen the violence firsthand, understood that this world operated by rules she'd never learned. Asking Luca to choose her over his survival would be asking him to stop being who he was. When dawn finally broke, pale and cold, Luca came to say goodbye. He was dressed in a dark suit, weapon holstered beneath his jacket, every inch the dangerous crime boss. But when he looked at Elena, she saw the vulnerable man underneath, the boy who'd wanted to be an architect, who'd cried at his first execution, who'd learned to bury his softness so deep it had almost disappeared entirely. "If something happens," he began. "Don't." Elena pressed her fingers to his lips. "Don't say goodbye like you're not coming back." "I need you to hear this." Luca caught her hand, holding it against his chest where his heart beat strong and steady. "Everything I have is yours. Properties, accounts, businesses. Vincent has all the details. The baby will want for nothing. I don't care about money. I know. That's one of the things I love about you." The admission slipped out naturally, like he'd been holding it in too long. "You see past all the rest of it to something real." Elena's breath caught. "You love me?" "I think I started falling the moment you walked into that coffee shop and demanded answers." Luca's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "You were so fierce, so angry, so completely unimpressed by who I was. It was like breathing fresh air for the first time in years." Tears burned Elena's eyes. "You can't tell me that now, not when you're about to walk into danger. Especially now." He pulled her close, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that tasted like promises and goodbye. "Because I need you to know that whatever happens, these last 2 months with you have been the most alive I've felt since I was a child. You gave me that, Elena. You and our daughter." "Come back to us," Elena whispered against his lips. "Please come back. Always." One more kiss, deep and desperate, then Luca pulled away before either of them could change their minds. Elena watched from the window as his car disappeared down the long driveway, Vincent staying behind as promised. The house felt cavernous and empty without Luca's presence, like all the air had been sucked out of the rooms. "He'll be fine," Vincent said from the doorway, though he didn't sound convinced. "Luca's survived worse odds." "That's not as comforting as you think it is." Vincent moved to stand beside her, both of them staring out at the empty driveway. "He's different with you, you know, more human. Before you, he was all strategy and control. Now he actually has something to lose, and it's made him vulnerable. But it's also made him want to live instead of just survive." Elena's hand drifted to her stomach. "What happens if he doesn't come back?" "Then I honor his last order and keep you safe." Vincent's voice was firm. "But he's coming back. He has to. He's finally found something worth fighting for." The hours crawled past with agonizing slowness. Elena tried to read, to eat, to do anything that might distract her from the images playing in her mind. Luca walking into an ambush, Luca bleeding out on some warehouse floor, Luca dying without ever meeting his daughter. Vincent kept his phone close, checking it compulsively for updates that didn't come. The security team moved through the house like shadows, their presence both comforting and terrifying. Afternoon faded into evening. Elena stood at the window as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire, wondering if Luca was watching the same sunset somewhere across the city. Her phone rang at 7:15, an unknown number that made her heart stop. "Don't answer it," Vincent warned. Elena answered anyway. "Hello? Ms. Carter?" The voice was cultured, older, carrying an accent that spoke of old money and older violence. "My name is Antonio Calabrese. I believe we should talk about Luca Moretti." Ice flooded Elena's veins. "Where is he?" "At this moment, sitting across from me in a very tense negotiation. He's quite concerned about your safety, which makes you valuable leverage. So here's what's going to happen." Calabrese's tone was almost pleasant. "You're going to get in a car I'm sending to collect you. You're going to come to me quietly without alerting Moretti's rather extensive security team. And in exchange, I'll let Luca live. And if I refuse, then I kill him right now. And then I come for you anyway. At least this way he gets to see you one last time before you both die." Elena's hand tightened on the phone. Vincent was already moving, trying to grab it from her, but she stepped away. "How do I know you won't kill us both?" "You don't." Calabrese sounded amused. "But refusing guarantees his death. Compliance at least gives you a chance. The car will be at your gate in 10 minutes. Don't be late. Ms. Carter, Luca's life depends on your punctuality." The line went dead. Elena lowered the phone slowly, her mind racing. Vincent was already on his radio, calling for backup, locking down the property. But Elena knew with cold certainty that Calabrese wouldn't have made this move without a plan to counter their defenses. "We can protect you," Vincent said urgently. "Luca gave me orders to keep me safe. I know." Elena met his eyes. "But Luca's about to die because of me, because I'm leverage, because loving me made him vulnerable. Don't even think about it. I'm not thinking, I'm deciding." Elena grabbed her jacket, her heart hammering but her hands steady. "Call Luca. Tell him I'm sorry, and tell him I love him too." She was out the door before Vincent could stop her, running toward the gate where headlights were already appearing through the trees. Behind her, Vincent shouted orders, but Elena didn't look back. This was her choice, her risk, her chance to save the man she loved, even if it meant walking straight into hell to do it. The car door opened, and Elena climbed inside without hesitation. Whatever came next, at least Luca would have a fighting chance. The car was silent except for the hum of the engine and Elena's ragged breathing. Two men sat in front, neither speaking, their shoulders broad enough to block most of her view through the windshield. She tried to track the route, to memorize turns and landmarks, but panic was eating at her focus. All she could think about was Luca sitting across from Antonio Calabrese, unaware that she was being delivered like a sacrificial lamb. The drive took 40 minutes, ending at a warehouse on the waterfront where rusted shipping containers stood like sentinels against the night sky. The car pulled around back, headlights illuminating a loading dock where armed men waited with military precision. One of them opened her door. "Out!" Elena climbed out on shaking legs, her hand instinctively covering her stomach. The man noticed the gesture, his expression flickering with something that might have been discomfort before hardening again. "This way." They led her through a side entrance into a cavernous space that smelled of oil and salt water. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across concrete floors. In the center of the warehouse, a table had been set up with chairs on either side. Luca sat in one of those chairs, his hands flat on the table, his expression carved from stone. When he saw Elena, every ounce of color drained from his face. "No." The word was barely a whisper, thick with horror. "No, you didn't." "I'm sorry," Elena said, her voice breaking. "He said he'd kill you if I didn't come." Across from Luca, Antonio Calabrese stood slowly, a smile playing at his lips. He was older than Elena expected, late 60s, silver-haired, dressed in an expensive suit that spoke of old money and older violence. He looked like someone's grandfather, not a crime lord capable of orchestrating murder. "Miss Carter, so kind of you to join us." Calabrese gestured to the chair beside Luca. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." Elena's guards pushed her forward. She sank into the chair, and immediately Luca's hand found hers under the table, gripping tight enough to hurt. His eyes were blazing with fury and fear in equal measure. "Let her go," Luca said, his voice deadly quiet. "This is between you and me." On the contrary, Calabrese settled back into his chair with the confidence of a man holding all the cards. "This is very much about her. You see, Luca, I've spent months trying to figure out how to break you. Your empire is too strong, your security too tight, your reputation too fearsome. But then I heard about the girl, the pregnant accountant who appeared out of nowhere and captured the great Luca Moretti's heart. She has nothing to do with our business. She has everything to do with it." Calabrese's eyes glittered with malice. "You made her your weakness the moment you started protecting her. Love makes men stupid, Luca. It makes them vulnerable. Your father understood that. It's why he never let himself care for anyone beyond their usefulness." "My father was a monster." "Your father was practical." Calabrese leaned forward. "He would never have risked his empire for one woman and an unborn child. But you? You've compromised your position, diverted resources, started a war you can't win, all for her." Elena's throat tightened. Every word was true, and the guilt of it was crushing. Luca had sacrificed everything to protect her, and now they were both going to die because of it. "What do you want?" Luca demanded. "I want you to understand what it costs to love." Calabrese nodded to one of his men, who stepped forward with a weapon. "I'm going to kill her. You're going to watch. And then you're going to spend whatever time you have left knowing that your weakness destroyed the one thing you actually cared about." The gun pressed against Elena's temple, cold and unforgiving. Luca surged to his feet,
but 3 weapons immediately trained on him. Wait, just wait. Why? Calabrese's tone was almost curious. Give me one reason to let her live. Because I'll give you anything you want. The words came out strangled.
My territory, my operations, my businesses, take it all. Just let her go. Luca, no, Elena started. Quiet. His hand tightened on hers, desperate. Please, Elena, just be quiet. Calabrese tilted his head, considering. Everything? Everything. I'll sign over every asset, every connection, every operation. You'll own the eastern seaboard. Just let her live. The warehouse went silent except for the distant sound of water lapping against pylons. Elena could feel her pulse hammering against the barrel of the gun, could see the muscle ticking in Luca's jaw as he waited for an answer that might never come. Finally, Calabrese laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You really do love her. Extraordinary. Your father would be disgusted. My father is dead. And you're about to join him. Calabrese stood, buttoning his jacket with casual precision. I appreciate the offer, Luca, but I didn't come here to negotiate. I came here to teach you a lesson about the cost of weakness. Kill them both. Everything happened at once. The man behind Elena cocked his weapon. Luca shouted something in Italian and threw himself across the table. The warehouse lights cut out, plunging everything into darkness. Then gunfire erupted from every direction, muzzle flashes illuminating the chaos in strobe light bursts. Strong hands grabbed Elena and yanked her to the ground. She hit concrete hard, the impact stealing her breath, her hands flying to protect her stomach. Above her, men were shouting, screaming, dying. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled her lungs. Stay down, Vincent's voice close to her ear. Don't move. More gunfire, breaking glass, the wet thud of bodies hitting the floor. Elena squeezed her eyes shut and prayed to anyone listening that Luca was still alive, that their daughter wouldn't grow up without a father, that somehow they'd survive this nightmare. Then silence fell like a curtain, thick and terrible. Elena opened her eyes to find Vincent crouched over her, his weapon still raised. Around them, Calabrese's men lay motionless, their blood pooling on concrete. And there, standing in the center of the carnage, like an avenging angel, was Luca. He was alive, bleeding from a cut on his cheek, his suit torn, but alive. Their eyes met across the warehouse, and Elena saw everything he'd been too afraid to say written clearly on his face. Relief, love, desperate, overwhelming gratitude that she was still breathing. Then his gaze shifted to something behind her, and his expression transformed into pure fury. Elena turned to find Antonio Calabrese backing toward a side exit, a weapon raised but shaking in his trembling hands. He looked old suddenly, stripped of his earlier confidence, just a frightened man facing the consequences of his choices. It's over, Antonio. Luca's voice was ice and iron. Your men are dead. Your alliance with the Rossis is broken. You have nothing left. Then I have nothing to lose. Calabrese swung his weapon toward Elena. If I'm dying tonight, so is she. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Calabrese jerked backward, his weapon clattering to the floor, a red bloom spreading across his chest. He collapsed against the wall, sliding down slowly, his eyes wide with shock. Luca lowered his weapon, his hand steady despite the rage burning in his eyes. He crossed the warehouse in long strides, standing over Calabrese's dying form. You were right about one thing, Luca said quietly. Love does make men dangerous, but not weak, never weak. Calabrese's mouth moved, trying to form words, but only blood came out. His eyes glazed over, fixing on nothing, and then he was gone. The warehouse fell silent again, broken only by Elena's ragged breathing and the distant sound of sirens approaching. Vincent was already moving, coordinating with his team to secure the scene and establish an exit route before police arrived. Luca holstered his weapon and turned back to Elena, who was still on the ground, her whole body shaking with delayed shock. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands running over her face, her shoulders, her stomach, checking for injuries with barely controlled panic. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? The baby? We're okay. Elena threw her arms around his neck, holding on like he might disappear if she let go. We're okay, we're okay, we're okay. Luca buried his face in her hair, his whole body trembling. You weren't supposed to come. Vincent was supposed to protect you. I couldn't let him kill you. So you traded your life for mine? Luca pulled back just enough to look at her, his dark eyes fierce. That's not protection, Elena. That's suicide. That's love. She cupped his face, her thumbs brushing away the blood on his cheek. You would have done the same for me. That's different. Why? Because you're some powerful crime boss and I'm just an accountant? Elena's voice was steady despite her tears. We're partners in this, Luca. Equal. You don't get to sacrifice yourself for me without me having the same right. Something broke in his expression, control giving way to raw emotion. He kissed her desperately, tasting of blood and smoke and promises neither of them should make, but couldn't help making anyway. We have to move, Vincent called out. Police are 3 minutes out. Luca helped Elena to her feet, keeping one arm around her waist as they navigated the warehouse full of bodies. Outside, multiple vehicles waited with engines running. Luca guided Elena into the back of an SUV, sliding in beside her and pulling her against his chest. As they sped away from the waterfront, leaving death and destruction in their wake, Elena felt the adrenaline finally crash. Her hands started shaking uncontrollably, her breath coming in short gasps. Panic attack, Luca said calmly, shifting to face her. Look at me, Elena. Just at me. She focused on his dark eyes, steady and grounding. Breathe with me. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. He demonstrated, his hand over her heart. You're safe. The baby's safe. We made it. Elena followed his breathing, letting his calm wash over her until the panic receded enough to think clearly. Vincent. How did he... I called him the second Calabrese mentioned you on the phone. Luca's jaw tightened. I knew it was a trap, knew he'd try to use you against me. Vincent assembled a team and tracked your phone. When you walked into that warehouse, we were already in position. You used me as bait? I used your bravery as an advantage. His hand settled protectively over her stomach. Though if you ever do something that reckless again, I will lock you in a tower like some fairy tale villain. Despite everything, Elena laughed. High and slightly hysterical, but genuine. Pretty sure that makes me the damsel in distress. You saved my life tonight. Luca's voice was serious. Calabrese was going to kill me the moment I refused his demands. Your arrival distracted him long enough for Vincent to get into position. You're not a damsel, Elena. You're a warrior. The SUV pulled up to a nondescript building in Brooklyn, one of Luca's safe houses, Vincent explained. They were hustled inside and up 3 flights of stairs to an apartment that was furnished but clearly unused. Medical supplies waited on the kitchen table. Dr. Martinez is on her way, Vincent said. She'll check both of you over, make sure there's no damage from the stress. And Calabrese's body? Luca asked. Already gone. The warehouse is being cleaned as we speak. By morning, there will be no evidence any of this happened. Vincent's expression was grim. But we still have the Rossis to deal with. Without Calabrese backing them, they're weakened, but not finished. Tomorrow. Luca's tone brooked no argument. Tonight, I'm staying with Elena. After Vincent left, Luca led Elena to the bathroom and started a shower, the water running hot and cleansing. He undressed her carefully, his hands gentle despite the violence they'd committed hours earlier, then stripped off his own blood-stained clothes. Under the spray, he washed her hair, his fingers massaging her scalp with surprising tenderness. Elena stood with her eyes closed, letting him care for her, feeling the knots of tension slowly unwinding from her shoulders. I was so scared, she whispered. When that gun was against my head, all I could think was that our daughter would never know me, never hear me tell her I loved her. Luca's hand stilled. Her? Dr. Martinez confirmed it this afternoon. We're having a girl. Elena turned to face him, water streaming between them. I was going to tell you when you got back, before Calabrese called. Wonder transformed Luca's features, softening the hard edges that violence had carved. His hand settled on her stomach, now rounded enough to be unmistakable. A daughter. Are you disappointed? I'm terrified. He said it like a confession. I have no idea how to raise a daughter in this world, how to keep her safe and innocent and good when everything around me is corrupt. You don't have to do it alone. Elena covered his hand with hers. We figure it out together, and maybe we don't raise her in this world. Maybe we build a different one. What do you mean? I mean what you said to Calabrese, about giving up your empire.
What if you actually did it? The idea had been forming in Elena's mind since the warehouse, crystallizing into possibility.
Not to him, obviously, but what if you found a way out? Went legitimate? Luca was quiet for a long moment, water cascading over his shoulders. It's not that simple. You can't just walk away from this life. Why not? Because people depend on me. Families I protect, businesses I support, territories I maintain. If I just disappeared, there would be chaos, violence. Innocent people would get hurt. Then don't disappear. Transition. Elena's mind was racing now, seeing possibilities. Use your resources to build something legitimate. Real estate development, private security consulting, whatever. Transfer your current operations to someone you trust, someone who will maintain the peace. You're brilliant at strategy, Luca. Apply that brilliance to building instead of destroying. You make it sound easy. It won't be easy. It'll be the hardest thing you've ever done. She pressed closer, her bump fitting against his abdomen. But isn't our daughter worth it? Isn't the possibility of a life without constant danger worth trying? Luca's arms came around her, pulling her tight against him. You're asking me to completely remake myself. I'm asking you to become who you were meant to be before violence was forced on you. Elena looked up at him, water dripping from her lashes. That boy who wanted to study architecture and read poetry. He's still in there, Luca. I see him every time you let your guard down.
That boy was weak. That boy was human. There's a difference. Something in Luca's expression cracked, revealing the vulnerability he usually kept locked away. What if I can't do it? What if I've been this person for so long that there's nothing else left? Then we figure it out together, Elena repeated, but I need you to try. For her. For us. The water was starting to run cold, but neither of them moved. Luca searched Elena's face like he was trying to memorize every detail, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone. All right, he finally said. I'll find a way out. It'll take time. Months, maybe a year, but I'll do it. For you and our daughter. Relief flooded through Elena, so intense it made her knees weak. You mean it? I've never meant anything more. Luca kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. But Elena, you need to understand something. Even when I go legitimate, there will always be people from my past who might come after us. Always be danger lurking at the edges. I can minimize the risk, but I can't eliminate it entirely. I know. Elena had made peace with that truth somewhere between the warehouse and this moment. But there's risk in everything. At least this way, we're choosing our future instead of being trapped by your past. They finished showering in silence, then dried off and dressed in clean clothes someone had left in the bedroom. Dr. Martinez arrived shortly after, checking Elena's vitals and performing another ultrasound while Luca hovered anxiously nearby. Everything looks perfect, the doctor announced, showing them the screen where their daughter's heart beat strong and steady. No signs of stress on the baby despite what you've been through. She's a fighter. Like her mother, Luca murmured, his hand finding Elena's. After Dr. Martinez left, they collapsed into bed, exhaustion finally catching up with them. Luca pulled Elena against his chest, one hand protectively covering her stomach, and for the first time in months, Elena felt something like peace. What should we name her? She asked drowsily. Luca was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing lazy circles on her skin. My grandmother's name was Isabella. She would have loved you. Isabella. Elena tested the name, feeling it settle warmly in her chest. Isabella Carter Moretti. You'd give her my name? Of course, she's yours as much as mine. Elena tilted her head to look at him. Unless you don't want, I want. Luca's voice was rough with emotion. I want everything with you, Elena. Marriage, family, a life built on something other than fear and violence. I want to be the man you deserve instead of the monster I became. You're not a monster. Elena pressed her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. You're a man who survived impossible circumstances and still managed to keep enough humanity intact to love. That's not monstrous, Luca. That's extraordinary. He kissed her then, slow and deep, pouring everything he couldn't say into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, desire crackling in the space between their bodies. The doctor said it's safe, Elena whispered against his mouth. If you want,
I always want you. Luca rolled her onto her back, careful of her stomach, his body covering hers with protective tenderness. But are you sure? After everything tonight, I need this, need you, need to feel alive and connected and safe. Her hands fisted in his shirt. Please, Luca. They made love slowly, carefully, Luca attentive to her every response and adjustment for her changing body. It was different from their earlier passion, less desperate, more grounding, a reaffirmation that they'd survived, that they were building something real amid the chaos. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Elena's head on Luca's chest while he stroked her hair with steady, soothing motions. I meant what I said in the warehouse, Luca said quietly. I love you, Elena. I don't know when it happened or how, but somewhere between your defiance and your courage and your absolute refusal to let me push you away, I fell completely. Elena's eyes burned with happy tears. I love you too, even though you're complicated and dangerous and completely wrong for me on paper. We're a disaster waiting to happen. We're a miracle that already did. She pressed a kiss over his heart, and I'm choosing it, choosing you, choosing us. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, sirens wailing, people living and dying, empires rising and falling. But in this small apartment, wrapped in each other's arms with their daughter safe between them, Elena and Luca existed in a bubble of hard-won peace. The war wasn't over yet. The Rossis still needed to be dealt with. Luca's transition out of crime would take careful planning, and there would undoubtedly be complications Elena couldn't even imagine yet. But they would face it together. Partners. Equals. Two people who'd found each other in the most impossible circumstances and chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage. As Elena drifted towards sleep, Luca's hand still protectively covering their daughter, she thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago. That Elena would never have believed this future was possible, that a medical error could lead to love, that a crime boss could want redemption, that she could find home in the arms of a dangerous man. But that Elena hadn't known what she was capable of yet, hadn't discovered her own strength, her own fierce protectiveness, her own capacity to love someone completely, despite, or maybe because of, their flaws. We're going to be okay, she whispered into the darkness. Luca's arms tightened around her. Better than okay. We're going to be extraordinary. And lying there in the safety of his embrace, with their daughter's heartbeat pulsing steadily beneath his palm, Elena believed him. Morning came with pale winter light filtering through unfamiliar windows. Elena woke to find Luca already dressed, standing by the window with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low, clipped Italian. When he noticed her stirring, he ended the call and crossed to the bed, sitting on the edge with careful deliberation. Vincent found the leak, he said without preamble. One of my accountants. Been with me for 6 years. Calabrese bought him off 3 months ago. Elena pushed herself up against the pillows, one hand settling protectively on her stomach. What happens to him? He's gone. Left the country last night with enough money to disappear. Luca's expression was unreadable. I let him run rather than deal with the mess of a body. Consider it the first step toward legitimate. That must have been hard for you? Everything about this is hard. He took her hand, threading their fingers together. But I made you a promise. I intend to keep it. The next week unfolded with surprising swiftness. Luca moved them back to the Westchester estate, which had been transformed into a fortress. With additional security measures, Elena didn't want to contemplate too closely. But instead of the isolated tension of before, the house felt different now, more like a home and less like a prison. Luca began the delicate process of dismantling his criminal empire piece by strategic piece. Elena watched him work from the study doorway sometimes, marveling at the complexity of what he'd built and the precision with which he was taking it apart. He met with lieutenants and allies, negotiating transitions of power, ensuring his people would be protected even as he stepped away. The Rossis sent an envoy, Luca told her one evening over dinner. They'd started eating in the smaller dining room, sitting close enough to touch, abandoning the formal distance of those first weeks. They want to negotiate a truce. Without Calabrese backing them? They're vulnerable, smart enough to recognize it. Luca set down his fork, his dark eyes serious. I could crush them now. Take their territory, eliminate their leadership, absorb their operations. It's what my father would have done. But you're not your father. No. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I'm trying to be the man you see when you look at me. So instead, I'm offering them a deal. They stay in their territory, I stay in mine, and we establish clear boundaries with severe consequences for violations. No more war, just cold peace. Elena reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. That's the right choice. It's the weak choice, according to half my organization. It's the strong choice. It takes more strength to choose peace than violence. She squeezed his fingers. Your people will understand eventually. And if they don't, you're building something new anyway. The truce was signed 2 days later in a neutral location with lawyers present instead of guns. Elena insisted on being there, despite Luca's protests, standing beside him in a black dress that was getting tight around her middle as their daughter grew. The Rossi patriarch, an old man who looked tired of war, shook Luca's hand with something like respect. Your father would be spinning in his grave, he said. Good. But Luca's grip was firm. Maybe that means I'm finally doing something right. As autumn deepened into winter, Luca's transformation accelerated. He established a legitimate security consulting firm, hiring former military personnel and offering services to corporations and high-profile clients who needed protection but wanted nothing to do with criminal elements. He invested in real estate development projects, using his knowledge of the city to identify undervalued properties with potential. And he transferred his remaining underground operations to Marco Santos, a lieutenant he'd trusted for 15 years, with strict instructions to maintain the peace and gradually transition toward legitimate ventures. It's like watching an empire become a kingdom, Vincent observed one afternoon. He'd stayed on as Luca's head of security, though his role was shifting from enforcer to advisor. Strange, but not bad strange. Elena had grown to appreciate Vincent's steady presence. He was teaching her self-defense techniques appropriate for pregnancy, insisting she know how to protect herself even in Luca's new world. You think it'll work? She asked, adjusting her stance as he demonstrated a defensive move. I think Luca's the most stubborn man I've ever met. When he commits to something, he doesn't quit. Vincent's expression softened. And he's committed to you and that baby in a way I've never seen him commit to anything. So yeah, it'll work. The wedding was Luca's idea, proposed one evening when Elena was 7 months pregnant and feeling particularly unwieldy. They were in the nursery, painted soft yellow now, furnished with everything a baby could need, and Elena was folding impossibly tiny clothes while Luca assembled a crib. Marry me, he said suddenly, setting down his screwdriver. Elena looked up, a onesie clutched in her hands. What? Marry me. Luca crossed to where she sat, dropping to one knee with surprising grace. Not because of the baby, or because we should, or for any practical reason. Marry me because I love you more than I thought I could love anything. Because you make me want to be better. Because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Tears blurred Elena's vision. You don't have a ring. I have this. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds. It was my grandmother's, the only thing of hers I kept. She told me once to give it to someone who saw past the Moretti name to the boy underneath. You're the only person who's ever done that. Elena's hands trembled as she took the box, looking at the ring that caught the light and threw it back in green fire. It's beautiful. Is that a yes? It's absolutely a yes. She launched herself at him, nearly knocking them both over, kissing him through happy tears. Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes. Luca caught her, steadying them both, laughing against her mouth. Careful, we have precious cargo here. We have precious everything. Elena pulled back just enough to look at him, this complicated, dangerous, wonderful man who'd somehow become her entire world. When? As soon as possible, before Isabella arrives and steals all our attention. His hand settled on her stomach, where their daughter was practicing what felt like kickboxing against Elena's ribs. I want to marry you while it's still just us. They planned the ceremony for 2 weeks later, a small intimate gathering in the estate's garden despite the December cold. Sarah flew in from California, crying when she saw Elena's ring and growing belly, demanding to know every detail of how an accountant ended up engaged to a security consultant, Elena interrupted smoothly, sticking to the cover story.
He owns a private firm. Sarah raised an eyebrow but didn't push, though her expression suggested she suspected there was more to the story. Well, he's gorgeous and clearly worships you, so I approve, even if the whole thing is wildly romantic and completely insane. That's pretty much the perfect description, Elena admitted. Vincent gave her away, walking her down a path lined with white roses while a string quartet played something classical and beautiful.
Elena wore a cream silk dress that accommodated her bump, her hair swept up with small flowers woven through it. She'd never felt more beautiful, or more nervous, or more certain that she was exactly where she belonged. Luca waited at the end of the path in a dark suit, his expression transforming when he saw her. Love and wonder and fierce protectiveness all mixed together, written plainly on his face for anyone to see. The ceremony was simple and perfect. They wrote their own vows, standing in the winter garden while their small gathering of trusted friends and associates looked on. "I promise to protect you and our daughter with everything I am," Luca said, his voice steady despite the emotion burning in his eyes. Not just from physical danger, but from ever feeling alone or unworthy or anything less than cherished. "You saved me, Elena, from a life of emptiness and violence and endless survival. You gave me a reason to live instead of just exist. I will spend every day of the rest of my life earning that gift." Elena had to pause to compose herself before she could speak, her voice thick with tears. "I promise to see you, not the empire you built or the reputation you carry, but the man underneath who reads poetry and would have been an architect if the world had been kinder. I promise to stand beside you as an equal partner, to challenge you when you need challenging and support you when you need strength. You gave me courage I didn't know I had. You made me feel powerful and protected and precious all at once. I will love you fiercely for all of our days." When the officiant pronounced them married, Luca kissed her with such tenderness that several people in attendance wiped away tears. Elena kissed him back, tasting salt and promise and the beginning of their forever. The reception was held in the estate's conservatory, a glass room filled with plants and warmth despite the cold outside. They danced their first dance to something slow and romantic, Luca's hand protective on Elena's lower back, accommodating her balance as she leaned into him. "Happy?" he murmured against her hair. "Impossibly happy." Elena looked up at him, this man who'd been a stranger 4 months ago and was now her husband. "How is this my life?" Fate has a twisted sense of humor. Or maybe fate knew exactly what it was doing. She pressed closer, feeling their daughter moving between them. Maybe this was always meant to happen. The medical error, us meeting, everything. "I don't believe in fate." Luca's arms tightened around her. "But I believe in us, in the choice we make every day to build this together." "Then I choose you, today and every day after." They celebrated until late evening, when Elena's exhaustion finally caught up with her. Luca carried her upstairs despite her protests, laying her carefully on their bed and removing her shoes with gentle hands. "I can't believe we're married," Elena said drowsily as he helped her out of her dress. "Believe it, Mrs. Moretti." Luca pressed a kiss to her forehead, then to her stomach. "You're stuck with me now. Best mistake I ever made. Second best." He settled beside her, pulling her into his arms. The first best was walking into that fertility clinic. Elena laughed, the sound soft and content. "Only you could make a catastrophic medical error sound romantic. I'm multi-talented." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, while outside the first snow of winter began to fall, covering the estate in pristine white. The weeks that followed passed in a blur of final preparations. Luca finished transitioning the last of his operations, cutting the final threads that tied him to his criminal past. Elena went on maternity leave from Morrison and Blake. She'd been working remotely since the attacks, her boss surprisingly understanding about her need for security measures. "Though I expect you back after maternity leave," he'd said during their last video call. "You're too good at your job to lose." Elena had smiled and promised to consider it, though privately she suspected her future wouldn't include returning to her old accounting firm. She was thinking about something different now, maybe starting a nonprofit, using Luca's resources to help women in difficult situations. The idea was still forming, but it felt right. Isabella Rose Moretti arrived on a frigid December morning 3 weeks before Christmas. Elena's water broke at 4 a.m., and Luca went into controlled crisis mode, timing contractions and driving to the private hospital with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for tactical operations. "Breathe," he kept saying as another contraction hit. "Just breathe, you're doing amazing." "Easy for you to say," Elena gasped, gripping his hand hard enough to bruise. "You're not pushing a human out of your body." Labor lasted 9 hours, long enough for Elena to question every life choice that had led to this moment, short enough that Dr. Martinez pronounced it textbook perfect. When Isabella finally emerged, squalling and red-faced and absolutely perfect, Elena burst into tears at the same time Luca did. "She's here," he breathed, his voice cracking. "Elena, she's really here." The nurse placed Isabella on Elena's chest, and the baby immediately quieted, her dark eyes, already so much like her father's, blinking up at her mother with unfocused wonder. Elena touched her daughter's impossibly small hand, marveling at the tiny fingers that wrapped instinctively around hers. "Hello, Isabella," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Luca leaned over them both, one hand gentle on his daughter's downy head, his expression stripped of every defense. "She's perfect. Absolutely perfect. She's ours." Elena looked up at him, seeing the same wonder and terror and overwhelming love reflected in his eyes. "We made her. Accidentally. The best kind of accident." They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them cocooned in the quiet hospital room, while outside the city continued its endless rhythm. But in this moment, nothing existed except their small family, built from chaos and medical error and impossible love, but no less real for its strange beginning. Vincent arrived later that afternoon, carrying flowers and looking uncharacteristically nervous. When Elena offered to let him hold Isabella, his tough exterior cracked completely. "She's so small," he said in wonder, cradling her with surprising gentleness. "How is anyone this small?" "And yet she's already got you wrapped around her finger," Luca observed, amused. "Damn right she does." Vincent looked up, his expression fierce. "Anyone tries to hurt this kid, they'll have to go through me first." "Get in line," Luca said dryly, but his hand settled protectively on Isabella's back. They brought Isabella home on Christmas Eve, the estate decorated with lights and garland that Luca had insisted on putting up himself. He carried the car seat like it contained explosives, moving with exaggerated care up the front steps. "I've got her," Elena laughed, following him inside. "You can breathe." "I'm breathing fine." "You're holding your breath." Luca set the car seat down carefully in the foyer, then pulled Elena close, kissing her softly. "I'm terrified. Is that normal?" "Completely normal." Elena leaned into him, exhausted and sore and happier than she'd ever been. "We're going to be terrible at this for a while, but we'll figure it out. Together. Always together." That night, after Isabella was fed and changed and finally sleeping in her bassinet beside their bed, Elena and Luca stood at the nursery window watching snow fall across the estate grounds. Luca's arm was around her waist, her head on his shoulder, both of them still adjusting to the reality of being parents. "I never thought I'd have this," Luca said quietly. "A wife I love, a daughter, a life that isn't built on violence and fear. I thought I was too damaged, too far gone." "You were never too far gone. You were just waiting for the right reason to find your way back." Elena turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I'm so proud of you, of everything you've accomplished these last few months. I did it for you, for her. You did it for yourself too, and that's okay." She pressed her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "You deserved a chance at redemption. Everyone does." From the bassinet, Isabella made a small sound, not quite crying, just announcing her presence. They both turned to look at her, this tiny person who'd completely upended their lives in the most beautiful way possible. "Think she knows how much we love her?" Elena asked. "I think we'll spend the rest of our lives showing her." Luca crossed to the bassinet, carefully lifting Isabella into his arms. She nestled against his chest immediately, her tiny hand fisting in his shirt. "I'm going to give you everything, little one. Safety and love and a father who shows up. I promise." Elena watched them together, her heart so full it ached. This was her family, born from the most impossible circumstances, forged in danger and fear, but emerging stronger and more beautiful for it. The months that followed brought their own challenges. Sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, learning to navigate parenthood while Luca continued building his legitimate business empire. There were moments of doubt and exhaustion, times when Elena questioned whether they could actually make this work. But there were more moments of joy. Isabella's first smile, directed at her father while he sang Italian lullabies his grandmother had taught him. The night Elena woke to find Luca pacing the nursery at 3 a.m., explaining architecture principles to their wide-eyed daughter. The afternoon all three of them fell asleep in a pile on the couch, tangled together in perfect contentment. Sarah visited in February, bringing gifts and demands for details. She held Isabella with practiced ease, having recently become an aunt herself, and studied Elena with knowing eyes. "You're different," she said while Luca was occupied with a business call. "Softer somehow, but also stronger. Motherhood looks good on you."
"Being loved looks good on me," Elena corrected. "Luca makes me feel like I can handle anything. He's intense." Sarah rocked Isabella gently. "But he looks at you like you hung the moon and stars, and that's pretty damn romantic." "It is, isn't it?" Elena smiled, thinking about the man who'd entered her life through chaos and stayed through choice. "I never expected any of this, never planned for it, but I wouldn't change a single thing."
"Not even the medical error?" Elena paused, considering the question seriously. If she could go back and prevent that clinic mistake, would she? Would she choose a different life, one without danger and complications, and a criminal-turned-legitimate businessman for a husband? "Not even that," she finally said, "because it brought me here, to this family, this love, this life I didn't know I needed." On Isabella's 6-month birthday, Luca made his final break with his past. He met with Marco Santos one last time, signing over the remaining assets and connections that tied him to the underground world. "You're really doing this," Marco said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Walking away clean. As clean as I can be." Luca's expression was calm. "The past doesn't disappear, but it doesn't have to define my future either. Your father is dead and buried. I'm building something different now, something better." Luca stood, extending his hand. "Take care of the business, Marco. Keep the peace. And if you're smart, start looking for your own exit strategy. This life has an expiration date for everyone." After Marco left, Luca sat alone in his office for a long time, letting the weight of what he'd accomplished settle over him. He'd done it. Against all odds and expectations, he'd actually walked away from the empire his family had built over 4 generations. Elena found him there an hour later, Isabella in her arms, the baby babbling happily and grabbing at everything in reach. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay?" Luca looked up, and the expression on his face was pure peace. "Yeah, I really am." He stood, crossing to them, gathering both his girls into his arms. "It's done. I'm officially out. How does it feel?" "Like I can finally breathe." He pressed a kiss to Isabella's head, then to Elena's lips. "Like I'm finally free." That summer, they threw a party to celebrate the first anniversary of Luca's security consulting firm. The estate's gardens were filled with clients and colleagues, all legitimate business people who knew nothing of Luca's former life. Vincent worked the crowd with practiced ease, having fully embraced his new role as director of operations. Elena moved through the gathering with Isabella on her hip, the baby attracting attention wherever they went. At 10 months old, Isabella was already showing signs of her father's intensity and her mother's determination, a combination that promised interesting teenage years ahead. "She's beautiful," one of Luca's clients said, a CEO of a major tech company. "How old?" 10 months. Elena bounced Isabella gently. "And already running our lives completely." "That's how it works?" The woman smiled knowingly. "My daughter's 20 now, and she's still running mine." Later, when the party had wound down and most guests had left, Elena and Luca stood in the garden watching the sun set in shades of gold and crimson. Isabella was asleep in Luca's arms, her head on his shoulder, completely trusting and safe. "Remember a year ago?" Elena asked quietly. "When we were still fighting for survival, still figuring out if this could even work? I remember being terrified every single day that I'd lose you, both of you. And now?" Luca considered the question, looking at his sleeping daughter, then at his wife. Now I'm still terrified, but in a different way. Not of losing you to violence, but of normal things. Of not being a good enough father, of screwing up this business I'm building, of Isabella's first heartbreak and teenage rebellion. Normal fears for a normal life. Is this normal? Luca smiled slightly. I'm still not sure I know what that means. Maybe normal is overrated. Elena leaned into him, careful not to disturb Isabella. Maybe we just make our own definition. And for us, normal is a family built from impossible circumstances who chose each other every single day. I like that definition. They stood like that as darkness fell, wrapped in each other and their sleeping daughter, while around them the estate settled into peaceful quiet. The security measures were still there, cameras and sensors and trained guards, but they felt different now. Less like prison walls and more like reasonable precautions for a man with valuable assets to protect. As autumn returned and Isabella approached her first birthday, Elena found herself thinking about beginnings and endings. The woman she'd been a year and a half ago felt like a stranger now, that careful, controlled accountant who'd walked into a fertility clinic expecting routine and walked out with her entire future altered. She didn't mourn that woman. Instead, she marveled at how much she'd grown, how much strength she'd discovered in herself when circumstances demanded it. She'd survived kidnapping attempts and warehouse shootouts. She'd fallen in love with a crime boss and watched him transform into something better. She'd given birth to a daughter who was the perfect blend of both of them. And she'd done it all with courage she hadn't known she possessed. On Isabella's first birthday, they celebrated with another small gathering. Sarah was there with her own daughter now, the two babies eyeing each other with cautious curiosity. Vincent brought a ridiculously large stuffed elephant that took up half the nursery, and Luca's new business partners came with thoughtful gifts and warm congratulations. But the best moment came later, after everyone had left and they were alone again. Luca carried a sleepy, cake-covered Isabella upstairs for her bath, while Elena cleaned up the remnants of the party. When she went to check on them, she found Luca sitting on the bathroom floor, Isabella in the tub surrounded by bubbles, both of them laughing at something only they understood. The sight stopped Elena in her doorway, her heart swelling with so much love she thought it might burst. This was her family, her husband and daughter, built from chaos but held together by choice and commitment and fierce protective love. Luca looked up and saw her watching, his expression transforming into that soft, open look he only wore with them. Come join us, the water's perfect. Elena crossed to them, sitting beside Luca on the floor, both of them getting splashed as Isabella discovered the joy of slapping water with her tiny palms. Happy birthday, sweet girl, Elena murmured, kissing Isabella's wet head. Can you believe it's been a year? Luca's arm came around Elena's shoulders. Since that day in the hospital when our whole world changed, best day of my life. Second best. He pressed a kiss to her temple. The best was the day you agreed to marry me. Third best, then, Elena smiled. The actual best was the day I walked into that fertility clinic and accidentally started this whole wild journey. Luca laughed, the sound rich and genuine, so different from the cold, controlled man he'd been when they first met. Only you could call a catastrophic medical error the best day of your life. It brought me you. It brought me her. Elena looked at their daughter, now contentedly playing with a rubber duck. It brought me everything I didn't know I needed. Same. Luca's hand found hers, their fingers interlacing in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. I was surviving before you, Elena, just getting through each day, accumulating power and wealth and nothing that actually mattered. You taught me how to live again. We taught each other. They stayed on that bathroom floor until Isabella started yawning, then worked together to get her dried and dressed and settled in her crib. Standing over their sleeping daughter, Luca's arm around Elena's waist, they shared a moment of perfect contentment. Think we should tell her someday? Elena asked quietly. About how she came to be? About your past and the danger and all of it? When she's old enough to understand. Luca's expression was thoughtful. I won't lie to her about who I was, but I'll make sure she knows who I chose to become. For her, for you, for us. She's going to have questions about why we have so much security, about why certain people can't be part of our lives. And we'll answer them honestly. His hand tightened on Elena's waist. We'll teach her about making hard choices and living with consequences, about choosing redemption over resignation, about building something beautiful from broken pieces. Elena turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd become her entire world. I love you, Luca Moretti, more than I ever thought possible to love another person. I love you too, Elena Moretti. He kissed her softly, a promise and a prayer. Thank you for seeing past the monster to the man underneath. Thank you for giving me a reason to become someone better. Thank you for our daughter and our life and this impossible, beautiful second chance. Thank you for being brave enough to take it. They kissed again, deeper this time, tasting salt and promise and the sweet certainty of a future they were building together. When they finally made it to their own bed, they made love with the quiet intensity of partners who'd fought for their right to this intimacy, who'd survived impossible odds to find each other. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Elena felt Luca's hand settle protectively on her stomach, a gesture that had become habit during her pregnancy and persisted even after Isabella's birth. What are you thinking about? She murmured. The future. His voice was soft in the darkness. What we're building. Where we'll be in 5 years, 10 years, 20. And what do you see? I see Isabella growing up strong and loved and safe. I see my business expanding, becoming something I'm actually proud of. I see us growing old together, fighting and loving and navigating whatever comes our way as partners. He paused. Maybe even another baby or two if you want. Elena's breath caught. More children? Only if you want them. But I won't lie. I love being a father. I love watching you be a mother. And I love the idea of filling this house with the kind of family I never thought I'd have. I want that too. Elena pressed closer, imagining it. More babies, more chaos, more love filling the rooms of this estate that had started as a prison and become a home. Not right away. Isabella's enough to handle for now, but someday. Someday, Luca agreed, kissing her forehead. We have all the time in the world now. Outside, snow began to fall again, the first of another winter. But inside, wrapped in warmth and love, and the certain knowledge that they'd survived everything life had thrown at them, Elena and Luca Moretti slept peacefully. Their journey had started with a mistake, a catastrophic medical error that should have destroyed lives instead of creating them. But from that chaos, they'd built something extraordinary, a family, a love, a future that neither of them could have imagined, but both of them had chosen with eyes wide open. Elena had walked into a fertility clinic expecting routine and walked out pregnant with a stranger's child. Luca had been a crime boss who'd buried his humanity so deep he thought it was gone forever. And somehow, impossibly, they'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful. Some might call it fate, others might call it luck, good or bad, depending on perspective. But Elena and Luca knew the truth. It was choice. Every single day, they chose each other. And in the end, that choice, repeated day after day, became a way of life. It was a choice that transformed the world, one person at a time. And in the end, that choice, repeated day after day, moment by moment, was what transformed a catastrophic accident into the greatest gift either of them had ever received. Their daughter slept peacefully in the nursery, safe and loved, and completely unaware that her mere existence had changed the course of 2 lives forever. And in the master bedroom, her parents held each other close, grateful for medical errors and second chances, and the beautiful, impossible miracle of finding love in the most unexpected places. This was their story. Born from chaos, forged in danger, and crowned in love. And it was only just beginning.